Neurological Disorders, Lesson 4.3, What Makes Us Go to Sleep and What Makes Us Wake Up. The goals of this lesson are to introduce the sleep-wake circuit, also known as the flip-flop switch, and to use the sleep-wake circuit to demonstrate how groups of neurons work together to control behaviors. At the end of this lesson, students should be able to identify the components of the sleep-wake circuit and describe how the components of the sleep-wake circuit work together to control our sleep-wake cycles. We'll achieve these goals by watching and discussing the video, as well as with a Socratic discussion. To prepare for this lesson, you'll need to review the key scientific concepts presented in it. They include the sleep-wake circuit, its components and their functions, which are the arousal neurons in the brainstem, the sleep neurons in the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus, or VLPO, and the orexin neurons in the hypothalamus, as well as the types and connections between these components and the effects of disrupting connections between them, which can lead to narcolepsy. You can review the scientific content in the background reading provided to you in the teacher primer, the teacher manual, and the student workbook. The teacher primer provides in-depth knowledge about the scientific content presented in the lesson. The teacher manual or lesson plan provides a minute-by-minute explanation of lesson structure, including instructions on how to manage the discussion and activity. And the student workbook provides additional explanation for your students. You'll also need to be sure to print the homework worksheet for your students and double check that the embedded videos on slides number 3 and 17 will play on your classroom computer. If you do have problems playing these videos within the PowerPoint slides, you can download them from the ND Multimedia Backup. A link to this backup is provided on the webpage for Lesson 4.3. The key point of the lessons due now is to engage students with the concept of neural circuits controlling our behaviors. We'll get to this key point by brainstorming things that make us fall asleep and things that make us wake up. In the do now, students will discuss 2 questions with a partner: what makes us fall asleep and what makes us wake up. You'll then discuss this do now later in the discussion. The key points of the discussion are the components, functions, and connections of the sleep-wake circuit. That activity in the arousal neurons in the brainstem keep us awake, that activity in the sleep neurons in the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus, or VLPO, put us to sleep, and that activity in the orexin neurons in the hypothalamus work as a control switch. We'll get to these key points by watching and discussing a video, as well as with a Socratic discussion. After discussing student responses to the do now prompts of what makes us go to sleep and what makes us wake up, you'll play the video embedded on slide number 3 of a narcoleptic poodle and ask the students what causes this to happen. This video allows us to dive into the neural circuit that controls our sleep-wake behaviors. The next set of slides allows you to introduce that specific brain areas keep us awake and other areas put us to sleep. We have areas in our brainstem that keep us awake, we'll call those arousal neurons, and that there are areas in our hypothalamus that put us to sleep. That's the VLPO. Slide number 5 abstracts these 2 brain areas and shows them as a schematic and prompts students to answer the question, but how do they know what the other is doing? This question is addressed on slides 6 and 7, that they must connect in some way and that their outputs must be opposing, meaning they must inhibit each other. The next set of slides then demonstrates how this inhibitory connection works. To wake up, our wake-up area needs to be more active than our go-to-sleep area. This both keeps us awake as well as prevents or inhibits activity in our go-to-sleep area. To sleep, the go-to-sleep area then needs to be more active than the wake-up area. This puts us to sleep as well as inhibits or prevents activity in the wake-up area, which would wake us up. The next slide then asks the questions, but how is this transition from sleep to wake and vice versa controlled? To answer this question, we revisit the discussion we had in the do now of what makes us feel tired and what makes us feel awake. Students likely have a variety of answers, the most common of which can be animated to appear on the slide after students have responded. And then you can tell students that neurons sensitive to these signals, particularly light and dark, switch the wake up and go to sleep areas on and off. You'll then introduce your students to the orexin neurons, which are located in our hypothalamus. Our orexin neurons are activated by signals that keep us awake and can activate the arousal neurons, which keeps us awake. You'll then describe what happens when the orexin neurons are switched off. Arousal neurons are switched off too, and we fall asleep because the inhibition to the sleep neurons is also removed. The key point of the activity is the effects of disrupting connections between the components of the sleep-wake circuit, specifically that narcolepsy results when orexin neurons do not function properly. We'll get to these key points with a think, pair, share on what causes narcolepsy. In the activity, we'll revisit Skeeter, the narcoleptic poodle from the video at the beginning of the lesson, and ask the students, given the sleep-wake circuit, can you predict what causes Skeeter's narcolepsy? You'll have the students work in small groups to determine what might be wrong in Skeeter's sleep-wake circuit and have them present their ideas to the class. The key points of the wrap-up: the effects of disrupting connections between the components of the sleep-wake circuit, and again, that narcolepsy results when orexin neurons do not function properly. We'll get to these key points by watching and discussing a video on narcolepsy research. In the wrap-up, the class will watch a video that describes how researchers have used dogs with narcolepsy to discover a gene that underlies the disorder. The gene identified was a mutation in the receptor for orexin, which means that dogs cannot detect orexin. The key point of the homework is again that the effects of disrupting connections between components of the sleep-wake circuit, and specifically that narcolepsy results when orexin neurons do not function properly. We'll get to this key point by reading and analyzing original research articles. For homework, students will investigate what causes narcolepsy by completing a worksheet that includes readings and data from original research completed in mice, dogs, and humans with the disorder. Students often ask for more details about the sleep-wake circuit and sleep disorders. You can find more in the Teacher Primer, Teacher Manual, and Student Workbook. One of the most common questions teachers get is what causes other sleep disorders? This is a wonderful question and one that you could dedicate an entire lesson to. And even if you don't, you can direct your students to the workbook readings for Lesson 4.2, as it discusses insomnia, obstructive sleep apnea, parasomnias, and restless leg syndrome, our 4 most common sleep disorders. At the end of this lesson, students should begin to appreciate the complexity of neural circuits, that various components will make them up, and that the connections between those components are critical in maintaining the overall neural circuitry's function. This lesson provides a concrete example of a neural circuit and how it controls our behaviors. The sleep-wake circuit presented here will be the focus of our next several lessons, and with each lesson it'll get just a little more complicated with more controls and connections. Don't forget, if you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, to let us know. You can contact any of the CTSE team members and we'd be more than happy to help you.